I have an issue that I'm going to take care of first before we get on to the water fund and the water and sewer rule regulation. I am going to be stepping down as chairman of the Water and Sewer Committee, effective immediately because of some personal reasons. And I intend to continue to serve on the committee for as long as I have been on the committee. But my two partners here in the on the committee, one of them will be taking over. I assume that they have had conversation because they knew about this a day or so ago. So.
Those goes.
If you want a grant, you can have it.
I'll jump in at one.
I guess that's a vote then. There you go.
2 to 1 for grant.
So with that, let's start discussion about the water and sewer rules revision.
Okay. Can I give you one? Yeah, pass these around if you would, please.
So, well, we're gonna start with the adjustment to, as you all know, during the transmitter project. And we've had a process in place historically when certain criteria were met for discounts or payment plans. And now with the reconciliation process that we've established because of the transmitter program, with conversations with the deputy auditor, we felt that we needed to establish these in the water and sewer rules. So it's an established process so we can be consistent moving forward. And regardless, hopefully we never have a scenario where we have this, but we've written this and created a playbook, so to speak, that we can follow regardless of what the situation is moving forward. This is a format that, as Jason and I were working through this reconciliation process, we started taking down bullet points and notes. And then between the mayor and the deputy auditor and Jason, they just kind of refined it where it can be utilized in multiple scenarios based on what's presented to us. So again, gives us consistency, gives us a playbook that we can follow. And it's fair across the board with a number of different scenarios. It also, as you know, on the second page, as you read through, it also has some accountability for the individuals that it's going to benefit or work with the customer. So they have to be, involved in the process. They have to maintain their payment plans, et cetera. So again, this was just one of those things that we felt we needed to add because we had an extraordinary situation that presented itself. We worked through it, but we wanted to make sure that we documented what we did and how we did it, and then we could utilize it moving forward if there was a scenario. So the idea, if everyone's on board with this, is that as a surface safety director, I would then enact this into the water rules, but then we would have to have this go for the sewer sanitary rules. Legislation would have to be created and then be voted on by council based on the recommendation. So, but this language would be inserted in both water and sanitary rules.
So where would this go in the water rules, which
It's actually, the numbers are formatted to fall into number 5.
well, okay, what are our current water rules from 2014? That's the ones I found
Yes.
online. Okay. So this would go where? Would this be under billing for services? Chapter 3?
Do you have it in front of you?
That's what we're pulling up right now.
Because the copy I'm looking at, item under billing for services, which I think this would kind of fit. Item number 5 is meter tests. Item number 6 is meter changeouts. Item number 7 is return check policy. Therefore, I'm not sure where these fit.
There is.
And I'm looking at a copy that was effective April 11, 2014, signed by Paul.
That's the most current.
Okay.
It would be, all right, so it would be, yes, section 3, billing for services. After, between, number bullet point 4, which is adjustment for leaks. Then we would insert this as, because the billing for, the adjustment for leaks spells out, how the building department handles, underground leaks. And then it would be both, it would go 5 and 6 directly under that subsection.
So under adjustment for leaks, is it under that chapter?
Well, it
or-
would, yeah, under that chapter, it would just, it would be inserted as basically, it would shuffle down meter
So,
test
so meter test is now 7.
7.
Got it. Okay.
So once that's inserted, we need to make sure that we change those numbers.
Yes.
Right, we just
Yeah,
didn't want to print out the entire red
Right,
line version
correct.
when we were only referencing one page worth of.
But again, this document is what we followed when we brought the water and sewer, we discussed the reconciliation process, the 75% discount, 500% overage. This just explains what we did, how we did it, and then how we move forward.
So what's the difference between an adjustment for leak in the current policy and 5B in this policy? Why are we restating that? So we now have adjustments for leaks. We've got 2 places. Unless this is considered an extraordinary situation in which an adjustment for leak that is currently in the document is not considered extraordinary.
Well, the adjustment for leak in the current policy is designed and kind of spelled out for an underground leak and how we would handle the reconciliation process for just a broken leak. This policy would be for those extreme situations in which it goes above and beyond just the current rules is for a 50% forgiveness, where this allows the flexibility in an extreme situation to go up to a 75%.
So define extreme so that when, define extreme, so I would know when 5B takes effect versus paragraph 4.
Yeah, so this was originally, which we didn't have it named as extraordinary, we had it as named just specifically to the transmitter project. It was recommended that we make it a little broader. So we can further define extraordinary to be situations where the bill is over the 500%.
Take a question. In following Grant's question, I guess I could use some clarification too. I'm a little bit confused because we have a one-time situation that occurred. What other type of situation would have to occur for the 75% to kick in? We know why this occurred. It occurred because we didn't keep up on the readings manually. If this happened again, would we not read them manually? Is this for that type of instance? Or is there something else we're considering here?
This was really just to be more broad because in some of the prior conversations, certain council members had specifically said, well, what if this happens again? We just wanted to have the process documented that it would be consistent. So I think just adding in the definition of extraordinary circumstance to be in situations where, bills were not read or where, data was not being collected for a period greater than 6 months and the city was unable to read the meter and the bill exceeded 500%. I think would be the extraordinary circumstance. Otherwise, we can make it simple and not put in not make it an extraordinary circumstance and just make it specific to the transmitter project, which was originally what we had planned to do. And then if there is another situation, then obviously it comes back to this group, which is fine by us.
I'm reading this and I 5 starts out with the words, for example, which to me says, I have stated a case, and now I'm going to give you an example of the case that I have stated. But there's no statement of case here. There's just simply, for example. And then we talk about the transmitter for 2023. I look at A as only applicable to that situation, and nothing else here is germane. So then I don't even know where B and C, the 5, this to me is confusing, obviously by the questions I'm asking. And I don't see a definition, bills to extraordinary situations, and I don't see extraordinary defined, except in this extremely convoluted thing, A bullet point 3, bullet point 1, where we finally start talking about 500%.
Yeah, and the reason we had to have both the process for just here was the scenario, here's the criteria that led to us being able to offer this, and we have the, 500%, and then we had the underground leak separate. Because again, it tied back in, this is defining how we managed it this last time. If people said there was an underground leak that wasn't detected for a longer period of time, we didn't just do the standard 50% write-off because it was kind of hard to wrap up both, how that fit into the overall issue. So I think what I'm hearing you say is you would like it to be specific to the transmitter project, and it has its own set of defined rules, because that's what we need, right? Is for the main goal of this is to make sure that for the audit, it's documented how it was handled. So bill adjustments due to 2023 transmitter project or, transmitter project. And then we just change it to similar to section 6, where it has, rather than, for example, it just has the background on the project and the issue that occurred. And then the following criteria are used for the adjustment of bills.
Would not say that I am not saying that. But that is better than what is written here, because what is written here, I do not know how it ever gets applied to anything or any future situations, unless we are setting up the criteria in A, which says we actually have to have a physical read, then we have to have new equipment or repairs made, and then there's got to be an estimate. I mean, there's all these bullet points that have to happen, and then we get this 500% thing. We're saying billing adjustments due to extraordinary situations, and I would like to see a definition of extraordinary situations if we are going to go with this language.
And that's fine.
How about a system failure of ours to be able to read meters remotely?
Okay.
Because then that covers all kinds. It could be a computer system failure. It could be like the wireless network going down like it did before. You can capture all that inside that definition.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe put a time frame for the period
Yeah.
that it's down for.
So using the terminology extraordinary situations, then we basically took what we experienced and we backed it up to the original situation, then to help identify what would be an extraordinary situation is what we did. It's convoluted, but it was convoluted to deal with the situation. But we had to essentially write down what we did, how we did it, to get to the finish line And then we were gonna identify it as something, and that recommendation was extraordinary situations. But to your point, we can clean this up and perhaps use some different terminology for a more broad perspective moving forward.
That's fine. But if it is an extraordinary situation and water and sewer doesn't meet as a committee and discuss it and talk about the appropriate response, then it's not too extraordinary.
Agreed.
I mean, you, quite honestly, as much as we try to write a document, something's always gonna happen that isn't in it. And one of the points that I believe Holly was making is what about the person that's at 499%? And the reason we chose 500% this time is because we could analyze the data and knew that there was this big gap between whatever number and 500, and that was a place to draw a line. So the reason we could do it there and not 499 is because there isn't anybody at 499 or 498. It's not until some lower where they had a consumption that could have been additional people using water or something.
Okay.
Well, the next situation, what if that 500 isn't the right place to draw the line? If it is, it would take new analysis. So by putting that hard and fast number here, I think we're setting a standard that we're going to be revisiting anyway. So, based on what I'm hearing, that we want to write this broadly for the next situation, I don't know that I'm comfortable with that. I would rather us say, let's just talk about what we did in this situation, explain the rationale, and call it a day. And the next time there better not be a next time, but when the next time does happen, sit around the table and figure out the best way to treat the citizens.
Okay. Because again,
I mean, that's me talking. I don't.
That makes a lot of
I mean,
sense, because yeah, if you set a hard and fast number, what if it doesn't fit the situation?
that's fine, and we can absolutely do that. Again, this was the origin of this document being put in was for audit purposes. And so it was driven for that perspective, but then let's create the document on what we did so we can use it moving forward in other scenarios. But I see your point.
Is that from a
We need to make sure the administration had permission to forgive bills for this year for the meter project. And to your point, I think if there was something done that would give us leeway moving forward, I think we would have to include a discussion on our notification process. Because part of this is, in the past, this would never have been discussed because we didn't have the ability to notify owners their water was leaking. And I'm talking about a long time ago. Now we have that ability. And now the utility billing department calls and says, hey, we got a bleep on our screen that says your water may be leaking, you may have a running toilet or whatever. Oh, no, we're filling the swimming pool, or we'll check. If you're gonna try to broaden this, I don't think you can do it without figuring out from your perspective, is that an obligation of the city to do, or is that a courtesy we do? Because that keys also when that would be extraordinary, is it, where's that onus gonna be to figure out if they have
to that point, the definition of extraordinary is when it gets right down to it, whatever city council says is extraordinary. We look at the situation and say this was an extraordinary situation. There might be a bunch of council could change, and the heartless next folks might say no, that wasn't extraordinary.
No,
But
Grant, I hear what you're saying with the word extraordinary, and to me, it sounds like the extraordinary is that meters were not read, right? For me, with this policy, I think we define meters not being read for what reason, right? And then that's where that discussion comes in that I had with Randy a while back saying, should there be a policy that says, since we have meter readers, we're gonna read the meter at least twice a year or every 3 months to eliminate this extraordinary situation. And then that eliminates the 500%. And we then say, okay, if we're gonna write off 75% of somebody's bill because their meter didn't get read, whether the meter failed whether they had a bad estimate, whatever the situation may be, we're gonna treat everybody the same and we're gonna write off 75%. Now, the problem I see with that is we're changing the underground section for Part B. It was 50% and you had to have proof that somebody came out and fixed something. With the situation up here, we're doing a 500% or higher write-off with no proof being shown that you had a leak, which is when the mayor had said, hey, well, I guess if somebody got a new pool, then they're gonna get their water 75% cheaper. So we're not treating everybody the same, but I think the word extraordinary should be water meter reading policy. And if we fail to read the meter and you have a large bill, well, then we did not fulfill our obligation. And if we have a meter policy that our meter readers are gonna read the meters X amount, that should eliminate us ever having that situation, right?
A
So,
couple clarifying points. First of all, they're not meter readers, they're meter technicians, and they have a
It's
lot
part of
more.
the job description.
They have more to do than just read meters, first and foremost. Second of all, the extraordinary situation happened when we lost 2G because this project was delayed as long as it was because of politics. Now we've moved forward from that. We're trying to solve a problem that was created. The extraordinary situation was we lost 2G before we could have the project completed.
I concur. I mean, I think this was a unique situation.
We're trying to solve the problem, then write the
Yeah.
playbook on how we fixed it.
I agree with that.
I agree, and so from the committee, from our standpoint, what my feedback is go rewrite this to satisfy, number one, I think it is, before I even say that, I think there's no doubt that council's made our intent perfectly clear by having discussions of this committee that made a recommendation to the full council, and council accepted the committee report. But for the auditor's concerns, we go and make these water rule adjustments that in essence say in the water rules what this committee recommended and council, the majority of council approved. And so to that, instead of writing broad, I would say write strictly for this situation, right here.
But then that will be in the water sewer regs then, or the water regs then?
Well, the intention was that the same language went in both, and then we can come back and have this reviewed again, and then legislation would be created for the sewer, sanitary rules, and then the water, but they'd have the same language.
Yeah,
I'm saying if this is wrote just for this specific incident,
Yeah, so
do you
there'll
want
be,
it, do you want it in the regs?
It has-
I mean,
yeah, there'll be a period, 3, 5, whatever years from now, through our audit cycles, where you guys will be able to drop those.
Okay,
Makes
because
sense.
as I say, that can't remain in there forever, because you're never gonna use it.
No, and you
again.
wouldn't expect it. Yeah, like,
Specifically for
yeah.
this.
And that's true, like, even, the rules evolve over time, but the rules are the governing documents that audit's looking for, not council legislation, but they're looking for the rules.
so we'll just pull out our version that was right before this version where it was very specific, and we'll be able to get that back to you guys. And we'll make sure that, and then obviously that needs to get on the next council agenda. So we'll just probably need to have a quick meeting to get that approval, or if your report just wants to say supportive of the rules moving forward, being specific to the transmitter project.
want to see them first. Yeah, I
I think we should see it.
and we could, if we wanted, have a meeting do a quick water and sewer before next council meeting. And have a committee report, have legislation on there, on the agenda for the November, what is it, 19th, the next council meeting. Committee report gets accepted, the agenda item can stay. If the committee report gets denied, then we can
Just do them in parallel.
Yep, then we can yank. And, it may be the way to do that is just to go, item number, in the existing system, item number 8, and then say, here's extraordinary, billing situations, so that if there's, if it's unfortunate, we have another one, you just add, it's 8.1, 8.2, And they're kind of isolated from the other rules, and to Jim's nature, they can roll off, it makes them easier to roll off without having to readjust the whole thing.
Okay.
So you just have 8.1 meter transmitter fiasco of 2022. And we talked about it. That is a way to construct it.
That'll be under 3, billing for services, number 8.
Yeah, we'll figure out the best way to
Yeah.
format it.
But if we're doing it for Jim's, the need here is that Jim needs that audit trail he needs it memorialized for an audit trail. Yep. And then that gets what you need.
Government can,
Okay, so that's number 5, but is number 6 acceptable to leave the payment plan language in? Because that was designed specifically for the ability for the department in situations in which we had customers. Okay,
We'll break out this
okay.
reconciliation scenario that we built to get
And
through
then
this, and then we'll find the spot for that, and then we can show the differentiation. What's staying, what can roll off.
Okay.
Because this is what we changed for the reconciliation.
Yes.
yes. So the only question I have on the payment plan is whenever we acquire judgments through municipal court or anywhere else, there's a statutory interest rate that's applied. And was that considered as part of the thinking? Not telling you to consider it or not to. I'm asking the question. And if it wasn't, it might be worth a thought. And right now, I think the statutory interest rate through small claims court is, I believe, 5%.
What is the statutory interest rate?
In other words, the state sets what it is.
I don't know, Doug, maybe the auditor reviewed and helped build this. Did you bring that up?
Do we have the option to?
So, in
it says-
other words, you're saying, hey, I understand you can't make this $500 payment right away. We'll allow you to pay it over this period of time. However, for that convenience, we're gonna tag you $2 a payment or a percentage rate. I'm just asking if you guys want to do. that.
So is that statutory rate so that we can't, so the rate is
So
optional?
there's no usury. The state sets it because they don't want usury.
Yeah, so I can't charge them 100%
Yeah.
interest. So if I'm gonna
On
charge
small
them,
claims, yeah.
I'm gonna charge them, the max I can do is 5%. And we can
That's the
also.
current, that's the current. max. That's the
Okay.
court-
Yeah, I-
That's the court, though. That's how the ordinance, that's the court.
I don't think we want to deal with trying to add interest rates to people and the calculations. I think that just adds another layer we don't need to deal with at the moment. And I don't think we need to penalize people further for not being able to pay their water bill.
So this was solely written to be able to help in extreme situations with circumstances beyond the customer's control and be able to really work with the customer to try to mitigate not only this situation, but we've had other situations in the past in which, clients have requested to be able to pay it over a period of time. And this just allows us that ability.
So does this? So paragraph 6 is really an addition separate from the transmitter situation. It's something we will now start to offer as a service to all customers. So it should stand alone.
Which you're correct, which is kind of why it was shaped the way it was.
What was the 24 months? Was that for everybody permanently, or was that just for this issue?
It's the same. We aligned this table with what we did in the project with everybody as well.
But the
So-
likelihood of getting to that point is very unlikely, given the transmitters being operational. Most of the time, people need a payment plan that's 6 months because they had a larger bill and maybe they had an unexpected, repair at their home and they need 2 months to be able to split a larger water bill out over time.
So is there criteria, because it says the billing office may offer to account holders that they believe are in need the below payment plan. So how do you believe or determine?
So I want to confirm something that you said. You have said this is for, you kind of hinted that this is for when there was like an equipment failure or something, and I don't think that's what I'm hearing from Jason and others. We are now intending to offer this to all customers in having as an option. Yes. Then how does this play with how does this language play with I know it says it's not, meant to, plans are not to be used with regular delinquent shut-off notices, et cetera. This has to play well with paragraph 3, the delinquency policy.
Yeah. So we have offered through the utility billing office, payment plans in the past, and then Rob or I have to sign off on them. It's kind of the discretion of the utility billing officer. Somebody calls in and is talking about the situation they're dealing with. It allows them some flexibility to say, okay, what's your financial wherewithal? Here, let's get you this, or hey, connect you with a local nonprofit that can help get you up to speed. So again, I don't expect them to be these larger dollar amounts, but when we were working with the deputy auditor, we said, let's just make the payment plan structure formalized and more and consistent between the two situations.
So to confirm, we've got 2 things that we're talking here.
Yes, 2 different scenarios, but a singular payment plan structure, which is referenced in that above
And
section.
that will-
I'm on the step higher than that. One is the payment plan that this paragraph, not currently paragraph, that's a separate one. And then also the extraordinary
Correct.
Transmitter problem.
Correct.
Yes.
So then to the committee, the question, we've kind of dealt with how we've kind of given them guidance on how we want the transmitter situation to be handled. It's the question of codifying the repayment thing. And is that something that the committee wants to recommend to full council that we put in place and offer? Because my understanding is previously it was only really done for because of the transmitter issue. But this is what I'm hearing now is we're saying we're going to offer this next year too, even if it's not caused by the transmitter issue.
This will be something that is put into the regs, that will stay in the regs. This will not come out. This will be the current policy. Correct, this one.
And it still has to be signed off by us.
Right.
And this is a scenario where there's not obviously a percent threshold, and this is just someone calling in saying they have an issue with their bill and they need a better structure to be able to pay.
I do have a question regarding your operational side of this. So, okay, we have somebody who owes, let's say $500. It's a good amount. We account. So they're on a payment plan for 6 months. So they pay $8, give or take. And at the same time, they're using water, which is going to be billed by month. So when is the earliest you might turn their water off if they have no intention of paying? Would you extend this first?
Okay.
So, what has happened with our current payment plans is basically, they are required to make a monthly payment. They still get a delinquent notice, to ensure that they're getting a notice every month as a reminder to the resident, that they're on a payment plan. If they ignore that bill, that delinquent, then we make a phone call and we tell them, hey, you have a payment due and you have a major payment. And so it's basically if they skip that month, they're getting a phone call and notified as a reminder that they are then not fulfilling the obligations that they agreed to in the payment plan, and they're going to either have to pay it all in full or the water will
So there's criteria and application, it sounds like it's needed.
Correct, yes,
So where's the criteria and application?
We just communicate it to the,
we have
documented
a
in their
document, we have with this criteria that's spelled out on page 2 of what their requirements are. And we,
Well, she said, we look at, see what their wherewithals for, what they can afford. Well, do you make them give you a tax return, a pay stub? And then is that payment plan above and beyond their regular water bill?
yes.
So they have to pay their water
They
bill
have to
plus
keep
the
their-
additional $80
Correct, they have to
every
keep,
month.
right, so they have to keep their bill current. So that's every other month, and then on the off month, they have to make their payment. Right, so since, so they're making a payment every month.
Let me ask this. Once they're in a payment plan, if they weren't in the payment plan, they would already been shut off, correct?
Correct.
So would it be reasonable that to assume we could shut their water off within 24 to 48 hours of missing any payment while, in other words, make it not part of your regular shut off cycle, so it could be a special shut off cycle?
It is, right now, it's treated as a separate shut-off cycle.
That,
It's not incorporated just with the delinquent shut-off. We deal with the delinquent shut-offs, and then the very next week, we evaluate the payment plans, make sure that everyone's staying current. Because currently, the current billing software does not allow for this to happen automatically. So this is done completely manually. The staff then goes through the book, makes sure that everybody has stayed up on their payment plan. If they have not, they get a phone call and, then they get usually basically a door hanger saying that, hey, this is your friendly reminder that you're gonna be shut off on this date if you don't make it.
what's the gap between the door hanger and the shut off? Yes.
Usually it's 1 to 2 days. It's a fairly short amount of time.
That's great. And again, that's you guys as in the committee and council's discretion, what you want to do. I would think you might want to consider making that a little clearer in this one, if that's what you're going to do. In other words, if any payment is missed, water will be shut off typically within 48 hours of missed payment.
Well, this says payment plan is monthly, not bi-monthly as well. So they're not, so they're gonna be paying their monthly
Which
bill.
is great. So you got
Which is
your
correct.
tags.
Well,
Correct.
they're paying their monthly bill plus the additional, and then on the off month, paying the additional again.
So the
Correct.
payment.
So it's not bi-monthly. And then I think it should also say in there, if you don't pay it, here's your 2 day, here's the date it is due by, and then here's that 2 day grace period. And then I think the criteria needs spelled out, so everybody knows if they qualify, don't qualify, if they can apply or not apply.
I would think if, from my perspective, the criteria doesn't have to be, but I think it just should be referenced as an addendum.
Well, people know that it's available, is what I'm
Yeah.
saying. Is it put on the water bill that it's an option at some point? Is it on the website? And here's the application for it.
Is this? See,
When we have a tenant who is, gets delinquent on their utility bills, is the owner of the property,
No, well, it all depends on if it's in the tenant's name or if it's in the owner's name. If it's in the tenant's name, the owner is not notified unless the tenant skips town. Then the bill reverts back to the property. So that's why we put it in there that it's the tenant's responsibility to notify the owner that they've set up this payment plan. Because we had a situation in which they just skipped town and it defaulted back to the property owner. And then we then have the discussion with the property owner.
Because it's still a lien on the property, correct? So we treat it like a lien on the property.
yeah, we
And
treat it,
state law allows that.
yes.
Correct.
But yeah, but if you had a tenant that was not paying their water bill,
Yeah, I can't speak to that. That would be a conflict of interest for me. So I have to stay through that part of the discussion. I apologize.
If a property owner had a tenant that was delinquent on their utility bill, on their water bill, and they racked up $500 and entered into a payment plan, I would think the property owner would want to know that they have a $500 lien on the property that in play.
More than likely, the tenant's not gonna come tell the property owner.
Correct.
They have a $500 bill.
But
And
if,
that's
but
gonna
if,
be a surprise to him.
but if we knew who the property owner was, you know, that to me is a courtesy you offer the property owner. You know, I would joke as we were walking up about my utility billing days. I worked in the town of Colorado State University. And we were a very property owner friendly town. And we would notify them if they were delinquent, if they were late paying a bill, if we were gonna shut them off. There was a big owner property owner, but we knew who they were, and that was actually in our systems. And so that bullet in there, that, you know, if we have record of who the property owner is, I think we should make the effort. We should contact.
So I think for today, I think these are all good notes. We weren't originally planning to try to get this done by the end of the year because of all the other things we had going on, but to make sure that we passed audit, we needed to get these two things addressed. I think we were planning to next year actually go through a full, thorough, have all of these conversations that we're talking about right now. So I think if we can focus on these two items that we have to get passed, and then early next year, we can work on all of the different items that were brought up, because I agree, I think it might be beneficial if, when, you know, we hit a certain dollar threshold, we notify property owners. I think we can do something like that, you know, through the county auditor, you know, just sending them a mailing. I think those are all good ideas. I think we're not gonna be able to work through all those details before we need to meet again to approve these.
So you only need the one thing passed, then you're saying, it's just A, and you're telling them that they can wait on number 6 and have further
No,
discussion?
we need both of these items passed.
I would think that Graham's questions are valid too.
Well, I don't think that we're gonna be able to put together a whole process map on notifying property owners if they're tenant. Like, I just wanna make sure that that is a more thorough conversation.
Yep.
And I think
Understood.
addressing it next year would be more beneficial. Right, so we will work on making this specific to the transmitter project. We will also try to incorporate some of the concerns about the criteria that is utilized by the team when establishing if a payment plan should or should not be offered. Because I would say it's not very regular. We don't really try to offer it, you know, frequently. It is really if somebody's in a bind. So we can try to put some parameters around that. And we'll get something, we'll look at our calendars and shoot some dates out to you guys in the next couple of days to get something on the schedule for next week or right before the 21st. You guys have a preference on next week, the first, just right before the 21st? Okay.
So on that one, I'm gonna move that we recommend further revision to proposed rules and meeting prior to the November 21 meeting to finalize. That is my motion.
Second.
All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Okay,
Still related to water rules, though, we do have another change in water rules.
So regarding the turn off policy, there's been a lot of discussion around when water should be turned off, how it should be turned off, the criteria and so forth. And back in 2007, when the flood happened, there was leverage created through the zoning ordinance to allow water shut off if there was non-compliance with some of those issues. And it was driven by FEMA regulations. So there's criteria put in there outside of paying your water bill and being in compliance with your utility bill, and feel that that can be removed from the shut-off policy moving forward. That the water shut-off is only related to utility billing payment if you come to that after we get through the payment plan process that we just discussed. So if it's related to zoning or any other ordinances, that would be eliminated from the shut-off policy.
So we'll eliminate paragraph 2.
Paragraph 2,
So
In
it's,
its entirety.
yes.
and that has, as we look back at it in the past 10+ years, it has only been used 0 times.
So why isn't this just part of the review to the rules for, that we talked about doing next year?
Because this has specifically been a point of contention, and as you may be aware, there was a group circulating a petition to address this, and I think just removing it at this point in time is beneficial to help lessen the steam out of that balloon. So what we would be looking for is in section, it's in my Roman numerals from afar.
4,
Section 4.
Section
Section
4,
4.
item 2.
You have it on the phone.
I can bring it up.
sorry, I did not think copies.
Got 2 minutes.
I guess
You got it. You said we've used it how often?
0
Zero.
times. And I did discuss, with
11.
Page 11.
with Eric Atkins and zoning, and he said, if there was another flood situation, that was kind of the reason that this had originally been set up. He said that instead, he would just recommend that we notify FEMA directly, or the National Flood Insurance Program, and they would be able to take action to get us the
So-
documents rather than utilizing the water shut off as a way.
We're looking at eliminating item number 2.
Yes,
Correct.
here I can share. So on page 11 of the water rules, under turn off policy would be due to refusal to cooperate with another city department would just be removed completely. And the next version of the water rules will have black.
So the second paragraph, any compliance issues concerning legal water or sewer connections will be governed under this turn-off policy. So you eliminate this turn-off policy, then where does illegal water or sewer connections get governed?
That there's a criminal section, right, Jason? There's a section where it talks about the legal connections, and pretty much that, and engineering department, I think, is the one that's able to.
For clarity's sake, I know our legal isn't here, probably for the record, particularly since we're recording, we refer to it as shutting off water service, not shutting.
All right, water shut off services.
Not an attorney, but I think that would apply for us, based on my understanding.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure that we have, again, not used that when we have found illegal connections for water stealing. We've used criminal violations with that.
Yeah, because if there's an illegal tap, one would assume we would just remove the illegal tap, and that would really pretty much take care of the water usage.
Well, no, what happens is a meter gets put on it, and they get billed for it. And then they're being billed and they're not paying it, so you shut it off for not paying. So you're charged for the theft. Meters put in place, and then either you pay or don't.
Do we get a lot of illegal taps?
No, we had identified a couple of years ago a number of primarily fire lines. Sorry, I'm scrolling. I need to get back to the section, so people watching online are probably now motion sick. No. And that goes back to, again, that unaccounted for water. We really honed in on that. And so we noticed that there are changes, significant changes in that. Sometimes we get calls for people, a neighbor stealing water from somebody, but again, we send police out to deal with that first.
This is something that's been on the books since when I was still employed at the city, and I disagreed with it then, and I still disagree with it, so I'm gonna make a motion. That we eliminate this.
Can I just add it to this?
Sure.
Would you mind if I motion it?
Go right ahead.
So I don't have to rewrite this?
Work smarter, not harder. Is that what we're going
So,
for?
I'm just trying to do my part. So.
in addition to the previous recommendation that we all agreed to, I want to agree with my good friend Randy at the sentence, the motion of the amendment act to also say removal of section 4, paragraph 2,
Item 2.
item 2. For the water rules. And Josh, if you'd be so happy,
I
second.
will gladly second that.
that would
As
be appreciated.
advised by the wise Randy Bruno.
Okay. Guys, if you don't mind, I'll just use your old signatures. Keep going.
All right, so I gotta.
Okay.
We've gotta, let me see how I give you access
That's your
to.
driveway. Okay, so one of the main topics we came to discuss was rate adjustment proposal. Administrative team has been working on this quite extensively for a while. We saw this coming a year and a half, 2 years ago. We were looking at budgets and pro formas, and we brought this to water and sewer about a year and a half ago. And with the transmitter project full swing and having estimates done, if you recall, the decision was made to hold on this initiative until we were able to actually have true readings, we were able to reconcile. So we are there at this point. We are in a position to propose this. So our current situation with the water fund is our water rates have not increased since 2011. And as our revenues remain flat, our expenses has continued to climb drastically. In recent years, we've actually eliminated capital as well as operational expenses in the water fund to maintain solvency in the fund itself. And of course, during COVID with supply chain and inflation and things, we've experienced chemical costs drastically driving up. So we've seen our expenses continue to climb drastically as our revenues remain flat. So as the service provider, we've continued to absorb those expenses as we've provided this service to the end users. And of course, as you look at our capital outlook through 2031, we have significant expenses that we anticipate from not only operational increases year over year, but the maintaining the infrastructure that we currently have and what our system's going to look like as we continue to grow. And of course, just some of the items that are going to be part of those discussions over the next few years: the master plan, the raw water line replacement and rehabilitation, the emerging contaminant project, just the infrastructure of our water lines, and then based on the demand of our system, where development happens, if it happens, what that's going to look like and what we have to do. A couple other points on our current situation. Just to understand what our other surrounding communities are in the state of Ohio, according to the EPA, municipalities as a whole average nearly a 4% increase year over year on their water rates, where ours have remained flat since 2011. So we just have to look at what we're doing with our revenues to maintain our current operations, grow our operations, improve our operations and our sustainability moving forward. Not only for our current capital, but set aside for those big projects in the long term. This picture, I think, is worth 1,000 words, if not more, because this shows the trend year over year, revenues compared to expenses. As you can see, our revenues have remained flat with a little minor movement, where expenses continue to climb year over year. And in 19, a couple of reasons, you see a drastic drop off. Number one, COVID happened, or the anticipation of COVID. So as you all know, you were around, the expenses were kind of put on hold. We also saw the trajectory of where the revenues were and where the balance of the fund was going to become. So from 2020 to 2022, there's just a few bullets of some of the main operational as well as capital expenditures that were eliminated purposefully from the spending of the water fund, and it equals over $6.6 million. If we would have spent that and continued to invest into our system, the dotted line trajectory actually shows where that gap would have been if we would have spent as we forecasted we should have. But again, cognizant decisions, good financial decisions were made, we backed things off, but again, at a certain point, these things need to be maintained. They need to be continued to be invested in. So we're in a position where we need to make an adjustment.
One thing I would add on that as well is that, as you guys know, we also put $1 million of our ARPA money into capital projects out of the water treatment plant. So we did also try to sink some additional funds in it to give us a little more runway.
Yeah, kind of to add on to that, one thing, I mean, you guys probably have seen with OPWC, CDBG, any type of grant funds where we used to use it towards maybe a roadway sanitary storm. You can kind of see the past couple of years, we've been focusing on water line because we still have to replace water lines, but we're trying to help that fund out at the same time. But we still haven't done, what we need to do yearly to kind of keep up with that pace. But, you can kind of see that where we're trying to utilize grant funds to help that move forward with that.
Just another visual to show year over year, the Ohio average, as it's grown from the Ohio average compared to the Finley bill comparison. The EPA puts out the analysis, and 2019 is actually the data that we have. There's one coming out that will include 20 through 22. We just did not have that data provided to us yet.
Is this minimum, Bill?
Yes. So this is a very, very busy slide, but it has a lot of data and we can walk through it. First and foremost, the upper left-hand corner is just a visual graph of what the water fund currently looks like, as well as how we project it out over the next 10 years. There's a few assumptions in the expenses. All the division heads do a great job returning some of their operating budget. Year over year, Jason, the water fund has a tendency to provide somewhere between a $750 to $1 million return of his budget. So we use that as a year over year return. We also made the assumption of 4% annual growth in operating expenses. Some large debt rolls off in 2026. There's also no grant funding that we've assumed in this as we move forward. And of course, some other things, just not to read all these bullets to you, but some of the other things that we're considering when the plant was built, so last renovations were done, et cetera. So what the top left corner is the green is your revenue. As you can see, it remains fairly flat. Your red bars are your total expenses year over year. The black line that starts in 2023, essentially where the revenue is and drops drastically to 2025, that's our beginning balance year over year, and essentially that's our piggy bank. And as you can see, it depletes very quickly. By 25, it's non-existent. The dotted straight line across the black dotted straight line along the bottom is actually the required minimum balance. EPA they require us to have a 3-month reserve of our operating expenses. The problem with how it's been year over year, it's remained flat, where our expenses continue to grow. So the blue dotted line actually follows along with that same principle with our assumed total expenses as we climb through the next 10 years. And of course, down below in the bottom left-hand corner, actually just lays it out. If you like to look at numbers rather than a picture, it shows where we are total expenses compared to revenues, the beginning balance of each year, and of course, the excess or lack of access by 2024 of our minimum reserve moving forward. So if this picture essentially says if we don't do something, we're going to be in the red next year. Of course, in the bottom right-hand corner shows a comparison of the different diameters of our meters, the number of users for each respective meter size, current monthly base rate compared to inside versus outside. So looking at this, we've ran quite a few different analysis and different projections on where we need to be. And this is the rate adjustment scenario that we're proposing. Essentially to basically put us in the black and create sustainability to our water fund. And the rate adjustment that we're proposing, as you can see, we create, to use the mayor's terminology, we've created a runway. We've righted the ship in 2024 where our revenues exceed our expenses. Our beginning balance year over year is sustained over our minimum reserve. Actually, not only, it's our projected minimum reserve out through 2029 in 2030. So we've created the ability for sustainability in our current fund, our current operations, and with the revenues that we're actually using, some of the assumptions of that is we have our, I like to call our operating capital, which is essentially a placeholder of $3 million year over year that's included. And we have to invest in our infrastructure. There's also a line in this pro forma that includes, I like to call the 100-year project. And it's a flexible number, but it's capital investment that running year over year, it's building for those big ticket items as we march out throughout the years, those 50-year projects, the 75-year projects, and so forth. So it creates that flexibility. A couple of things, this does not include any grant money or any funding from that source. So this is us sustaining our budget and our fund the way we need to keep. We need to do what we have to do to keep sustainability of our own fund. So what everyone wants to probably understand is the bottom right-hand corner on a comparison. Again, very similar table. You have your meter size, and just to put reference, and you'll get to it in the next slide. Residential's primarily, they all fall within the first three rows. Primarily, 16,000 of our consumers fall in the top row, the 5/8 inch, but we'll get to that in a second. It'll be a little more clear. But our current base rate compared to our proposed base rate, and this is on a monthly basis. So you have your current base rate compared to your proposed, and then the monthly increase, and then an annual increase. So one thing we've always talked about is I always want to take in consideration how this is going to impact the people on fixed incomes. And this is typically your smaller residential groups that are on the fixed incomes, your base rate, if you will. So
what's the average calculation? What's the percentage we're increasing by?
this, the increase is 50%. Is that right?
50%?
On the base rate, yes.
And the base should
Go back to the slide,
Yeah,
the right-hand column.
The annual increase on a base rate is $50. This next slide is going to lay it out. So the monthly impact, the monthly residential impact for inside users, which is 90% of our consumers. We broke it out by the three that would impact, as well as trying to create an explanation on how it would impact different family sizes. This is actually minimum usage, family of 3 and family of 6, monthly impact as well as annual impact. And this is going to include not only base rate, but usage rates. And then like obviously 3/4 and then 1 inch meters.
So one thing I would note is if we had done, as we looked at other communities, an annual 4% increase since 2011, our proposed rate is still 10% below what it would be if we had done that. So obviously it is a significant percentage change, but when you're dealing with, such a small dollar amount, that is more dramatic.
So, and then just because obviously the outside user group, this is the same table with that impact of what that would look like, still maintaining still 1.5 times rate that we currently have for the outside. So same diameter comparison, same family comparison, and the monthly versus annual impact. So future considerations. Essentially, the annual review, what we want to do is we're proposing to make this change this year so we create solvency and we create sustainability in our current situation, in our current fund, maintaining our operational situation. But then moving forward, we want to then on an annual basis, look at our revenues compared to our expenses, how things are adjusting, maintain that solvency year over year moving forward. Again, there's variability in our expenses. The revenues may adjust based on users, based on efficiencies in what people, green efficiencies, green initiatives. So we just have to look at what this is going to look like year over year. But this proposal will get us into not only 2024, but through 29 before another situation presents itself. So again, ongoing evaluation of capital needs for maintenance of current infrastructure and system growth. Do we pay cash or do we take on debt? Based on what those scenarios are, how big the debt's going to be for what projects. The whole minor annual increase versus an as-needed reconciliation. We've went 13 years almost since we've had a rate increase. We absorbed a lot of cost over those years to put us in this situation where that percent does look drastic. But to the mayor's point, it should have been perhaps done. It hasn't, but we've absorbed it, and we're in a position where we have to make that decision. Short-term priorities while positioned in the water department for long-term sustainability. We've had these high-level conversations, but the master plan is the priority. We have got to have that evaluation of our current system. We have got to have the analysis on what the priorities are, where those priorities fall into implementation and execution, as well as what that's going to cost.
What does that, do you have a chart that shows for year 24, the increases, where we're going to be with revenue and expenditures?
Yeah, that was the second
Yeah.
draft slide.
That was
After the changes?
Mhm.
This,
That one's after.
yes,
This is with the change.
So you're also saying you're going to be looking at doing an increase annually?
No, not in this proposal. This proposal is a one-time 2024 rate increase.
Oh, I thought you
And
were
then-
looking at it annually.
And then in 2024, we will evaluate and have discussions with the Water and Sewer Committee on what this looks like when we move forward. The priority is right-sizing the ship, so to speak, get us in the black in 24, and then we have to prioritize some of these projects because we talk about what if this user comes in? What if this residential comes in? Where it comes in? Do we need to add a water tower? Do we have to add 2 water towers? Do we have to add SCUs? Raw water lines. We've had all these scenarios and these discussions. We need a plan. And we need an analysis, and that master plan is that direction for us. It's our playbook moving forward. And it'll tell us if this happens, you should prioritize this, and et cetera. And then if that is a prioritization, this is what your rate structure should look like to maintain that sustainability of your water fund. So, these are the short-term projects versus the long-term, but these are all things that we have got to have on our radar, and that's what the master plan will help guide us in.
And with the master plan, I think you just said it, but I just want to clarify, there will be some review of what rates would need to
Yes.
maintain to do some of these bigger projects and stuff like that.
Yes.
Are you abandoning the water model that Arcadis did then for the master plan, or do they work together?
They work together.
Is the Arcadis plan updated?
yeah, we ran
use
this
that
through
for
that.
this.
Has it been, we updated it in-house, correct?
Right, because we had it updated by Arcadis a couple, 2 or 3 years ago, and then I've just kept up.
Okay, so there hasn't been a review there now, but still working on it, which is good. From what you said you're doing this. This is your authority, correct, Rob?
It is.
So you're doing it. So you're not looking for input. You're telling us what you're doing and why.
I am having this conversation with the Water and Sewer Committee, so they understand and the community understands our situation financially in this fund and why behind it, and hopefully getting the support of the Water and Sewer Committee to understand it and move forward.
I guess to that point, you folks probably have some knowledge that has not been imparted, at least on me, and I think there would be value to impart on the community as a whole prior to saying you're moving forward and making that change. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm saying from perspective, I don't think the case has been made. And I don't think the case is made for a couple reasons, and you may be able to make that case when you include your knowledge either more thoroughly or in a different manner. Because when you say our expenses, that we haven't raised the rates in 13 years, I don't see that as a reason. I see that as something we should be proud of what we've done. You've been our people, our operations people. And I do the same thing. When we say that average, we're lower than average. That's something to brag about. That's something to recruit what we want into our community. That's not a reason to raise rates. And I think
That's not, to be very clear, that is not the reason.
Well, I know.
However, we
It's not a justification.
still with the presentation, we still will be below those rates.
I think that's irrelevant. I think it's not part of why you raise rates. This is my perspective. I think the model not only needs to be reviewed professionally to make sure we updated it correctly, not questioning our skills, but we should have Arcadis look at it and it should be presented as a whole so this body can understand that model. I think they deserve that because they're supposed to be the financial advisor to what you guys are doing. And that technical proposal and the model should show what's going on with regard to the system, where that's coming from. Also, my other concern, and I think we're weak in making a pitch, particularly for a 50% increase in our water rates, is that you're just now getting the transmitters up. We're just now getting readings done. We don't have a true year or two's worth of water usage and revenue projections under our belt that are based on real numbers for the last couple of years. I think that's a weakness in your argument. And I think you need to look at that. Plus, at the same time, we are forgiving significant dollars in water. I'm hoping that, and I haven't requested it yet, and if Ginger did, that I don't go through her, but I want to see a list of who and how much. That's important. That's part of my audit process. The other thing is we're still waiting for utility billing to pass their internal audit controls. I'm sure they'll pass them next time, but we want them to pass those. And one of my questions, and I'm very concerned with regard to what's going on with how we're driving this community economically. How do we know? How do we assure the community that we're not oversizing our system or we're not projecting the what ifs? We don't bill for what ifs. We bill for what we know. What if a business comes in that's going to use water that says we're going to need to increase these lines? You do it like you did the Sheets project. You say, this is what we know the costs are going to be. So we're going to have to include those costs. Those costs are going to factor into this. And then if we need to do a bond anticipation note to pay for that, we do it. If we want to pay cash, we do it. But I don't think it's fair to the community to bill for what ifs from my perspective. Again, I'm speaking from perspective here.
Can you go back,
There's no assumption. This is
Rob,
the
could
reality,
you go back to,
current condition.
yeah, so, no, I agree. I think it's, with what Jim said, that it is, we should be proud of the fact that we've held these rates steady for so long. I've got the 2009 utility rate study in front of me, and it was saying that, 2012, we should have raised 3.5%, 2013, 5%, 2014, 5%. And we held flat, so that is definitely a benefit and to the community. But eventually, you get caught, and that's what I'm seeing just in 2023 alone is that the
So,
is a word, yeah, is a, I mean, you can just tell. If we wait till 2024, we're we're negative.
Based on budgets, correct? That's not, we don't know.
So the
No, we-
assumption is, that's assuming that we have the annual increase in operating expenses that we just budgeted, is that he's gonna turn back in $750,000.
What's changing between last year and this year? Because your cash balances have grown the last 3 years.
Because we pulled back on a bunch of it, that 6 million, I would like to address a number of issues that you brought up. So first of all, the reason our cash balances has increased is because we have put off some routine maintenance that needed to be done, recognizing that our fund was not in a good position, recognizing that we were going to need to put significant amounts of money into the transmitter project to expedite that, as well as then to make sure that we held steady. I want to be very clear, none of us want to raise water rates. And we completely agree that it is a huge selling point for our community and something that we want to continue to keep a close eye on, which is one of the reasons, back to Councilwoman Frishy's point, that we are not recommending an annual increase, because I think there's a responsibility of us to, on an annual basis, review the entire position of the fund, the capital plans, potential debt issuance, to then be able to maintain the low rates as long as possible by making those operational tweaks. Unfortunately, we're in a position, because we kept our rates so long and have had ongoing maintenance that we needed to do, that when you look at the projections, we're not going to be in a good position, whether it's next year or the following year. We have to make a change. So, as you mentioned, the Arcadis model was utilized to run this, including the capital fund, the roll-off of all of our debt in 2031. All we did here was put it in a nicer graph so that these slides can also be made available to the public so that they can review them. Additionally, I would agree that as we look at our revenues with the transmitter project, we are confident that they are going to, yes, this year our revenues actually may be lower because of some of the refunds that had to occur. However, I don't expect us, we now are getting true reads. So I'm very confident that because we are getting those true reads, there's not going to then be any discrepancies in the bills that are being sent to our residents. We certainly would not do that. Yes, I would love to have more time to delay this, but that's simply not the position we're in. Additionally, as we look at, I know you have repeatedly brought up that we need to be putting additional cash aside for some of those long-term significant projects, whether it's be an expansion of our plant, a significant remodel of our plant in 2031, or in that close proximity, it's going to be a 100-year-old plant. And we have not been able to set aside a significant amount of cash to do that. So that's one of the variables that's not currently built in here. We did put a little bit of cash buffer starting out in, I think, 2025 to start building some additional cash set aside. But one of the reasons we didn't build it in extensively is because we need to have that conversation. Okay, if we believe we're going to need to do significant improvements in 2030, what is council's objective on to have cash on hand or to be able to leverage debt issuance for larger projects, or are we simply going to pay cash? If we're simply going to pay cash for every project, then we're going to really have to raise rates, and I don't think that that's the right move. But we also don't want to take out debt right now when interest rates are so high. So it's a balancing act, and we need to have more cash on hand to be able to leverage debt issuances when the rates are low,
Explain
if
that.
necessary.
I don't understand that. You have to have more.
Don't
cash
you want to
on hand
borrow money when money is cheap?
leverage. So you want more cash on hand to get through to when you can borrow money at a reasonable
Potentially.
cost.
I'm saying that that is a conversation that we need to have, and at this point, I'm making the smallest adjustment. We're recommending the
Okay.
smallest adjustment possible to both ensure we have good capital reserves and then be able to have a conversation. Hopefully, we're able to make adjustments enough and leverage grants and bring on these things that we can store up some additional revenue. But at this point in time, as the, mayor of this city, our current cash reserves and the current cash reserve projections are not sufficient, that I believe that it is a sustainable fund.
I would say that based on that you can make that case based on the budget you present. To finish where I was going. A couple things that haven't been mentioned yet. At the same time, you weren't increasing rates, our debt was coming. So we rolled off a significant amount of debt on this fund over that period of time. And last time we discussed this, that you presented this to me, you were evaluating, because you don't know, you don't have your long-term model. We haven't had a full vetting of whatever this capital plan is. project by project specific and have it tied to the strategic plan and economic development thoughts and ideas that we have. What we talked about was, is it better to incrementally look at that? In other words, you lay 50% on people today, and this may or may not bear out to be true. You lay a lower amount out to our users today, and you see where you're at a year from now, when you actually have a year of water usage under your belt, and you have more modeling projections under your belt, and you have vetted whether growth is a good idea or not. I mean, we have spent some money that may or may not be proper for the size of system that we have. And we have to marry where the system is growing to what our strategic plan initiatives and to what we want to be. We can no longer afford, in my opinion, for the individual components of the direction of the water system, the direction of zoning, the direction of land use, the direction of income tax. Those things now have to all tie strategically to the plan we're putting in place for the type of community we want to be. So it's a greater argument. I get where you're going. I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying to you, until we see a few more pieces of this information, and I'll give you a great example. If you flip forward to the water line. The water line, I have yet to hear a case for why we need a second raw water line, other than we're scared something can happen to it. And that's not a realistic fear. In other words, if we have an engineering analysis that line is failing, and that we know exactly what's going on, that's one thing. But to say we want a second one and we're afraid, that's not an argument. And I have yet to see an engineering analysis of that. Now, there may be one that exists, but it's not been presented to me.
What do you think is part of the master plan?
I don't know.
Exactly, it's part of that analysis.
And
So
that's my concern.
That is a primary artery. We have got to make sure that, as well as everything else, is analyzed for our sustainability of our water system.
But you just said you're pricing in the potential for replacement of that. In other words, I'm arguing that it's tough to make the case to the community that a 50% rate increase is justifiable when you don't have that
The
plan.
raw water line is not budgeted in. The master plan is to analyze the need for that. Is it a rehab? Is it a rebuild? Whatever that is, that's not for you and I to decide. That's not for us to decide. That's where an expert comes into play. We have to pay them to analyze our system. Current system for sustainability, if nothing else changes today. We have an aging system. You've said that. You've talked about the $50 million water plan.
Sure.
That's what this master plan is for. Take away the master plan. Our current operational system needs that. This increase for our staffing, for our chemicals, for the things that we've eliminated from our operating budget, not to mention capital. We've taken those things that needed to be done and shelved them. We prioritized them. We're going to get in a position where the shelving of things gets too heavy and we have failure. So we have to increase the rates. No one wants to do that. We have to increase the rates for sustainability, and then we can have an expert come in and analyze when and what has to be done. That's all we're looking to do.
Well, okay, Jason, question for you. You have had the transmitters operating here for a bit. Are we seeing our water consumption now trending towards past yearly consumption patterns?
Yes.
So it ties in, I would imagine.
Yeah, we're seeing the trend come back. I mean, when you look at the numbers of even the estimations and the reconciliation, the system was pretty good overall. The outliers were when you look at the numbers, the outliers were extremes, and now the system is trending back to what we were projecting. Yes.
So you don't see from an expense standpoint. You have a relatively good level of confidence on expenses, like for example for 2024, 25.
Yeah.
They're gonna trend.
Yeah, specifically with chemicals, we've seen a very steep incline, and we rolled the dice on a couple, and we're able to get things to come down a little bit. But from conversations I've had with vendors and with suppliers, the industry as a whole has used this time period as more or less a correction factor, and they're not seeing it trend back down anytime soon.
Do we do multi-year purchase agreements on a lot of the
Yes.
chemicals?
And on some of our higher ones where we saw drastic spikes, we only did, we pulled them back out, rebid them. Sodium hypochlorite is a perfect example. We only did a 1 year because it went, it more than doubled, and it went down 20 cents, it went down to roughly 20 cents on the rebid, which then yields us about a $20,000 savings over next year. So we're now having to watch and monitor, but then our lime price came in, actually nobody bid our lime, and the prices we're seeing from the vendors is going to be a substantial increase for 2024, which is why they didn't bid it. So
Did we have some chemicals that we were on multi-year that they wouldn't honor it and we ended up having to rebid
Correct.
it just this last year?
So.
How much is water per gallon produced that based on the chemical prices now? It's like $10 a gallon or something, or $10, how much is per gallon produced? And that's a number we should know.
So, Jason, unless I would be very impressed if you had that number off the top of your head
Well,
today, but no, I'd like to make a
Let me
couple
finish my
quick.
sentence, please. My point is, I get where you guys are going, Rob, I get what you're trying to say. I think you should strip everything out of this, except here's our current operations, here's our current capital, here's the funding we have for that, and here's those expenses and the difference, and here's how we make up that gap. You can talk about chemicals all you want, the money's in the capital. The issue's about capital, the issue's about, you've got to be, if you're really this stretched, where you're walking into a 50% increase, you better be very selective what lines you oversize, what lines you put in, what lines you do or don't need, where you extend beyond the need. You need to be very, very selective about these things and doing that, and you need to make that case to the community. And I think we're capable of doing that. But also in your vetting, this committee's vetting of the capital plan, I think you need to consider, and I'm not telling you what to do again, but I would suggest that you consider vetting this portion of the capital plan separately from the council meeting and more in depth than you get in your typical capital review in a council meeting. That would be my suggestions.
Go.
So I guess speak on the water line sides, like there hasn't been, for capital, we don't have anything built in for the oversizing, the extension or anything like that. When I first came here as project manager, we were spending over $1 million a year on water line replacements, replacing what was needed for our residents for the 90% that's paying for this fund. Since then, we've had, in the past couple of years, we've only spent $300,000 roughly, give or take, but a lot of that is because we're trying to find grant funds with that. The past couple of years, we have not done general just replacements to make sure that we're not having water leaks that are losing or, anything like that. So a lot of that, I don't want the narrative to be that we're doing all these line extensions, line upsizing, all that. A lot of this is our maintenance that we have to do on our current infrastructure right now that had to be pushed off because we didn't have that because we had other priorities that were needing to push forward with that. Looking at the capital side, I do a lot of capital work with that, work with the whole team on that, and we've thinned that out as much as we can. We looked at it, is this a need or is this a want? If it's a want, you're pushing that off. Backups, push that off. You're going to have to make those work for the next 5 years or 10 years or whatever it is. But our main focus is those water lines that are a crucial part to, our citizens that are out there losing water when we have breaks, just because we're losing water on that, there's a big impact also when we're closing down a road and stuff like that. No, it's not a dollar for dollar thing, but it's also, we have an impact on people's daily travel on where people go. There's a money cost of impact on that. So make sure that we have good water lines throughout that is a huge part. And that's where it's been lacking. From my side, I can see huge on capitals. We have not had the funds to move forwards with a lot of these replacements where we should be, where we feel comfortable, where we should be at right now.
Randy,
And some of these projects, and correct me if I'm wrong, some of these projects are actually in the plant themselves to keep the plant going, CO2 tanks.
Yes.
That is one of the the generator, I mean, that's, I know money has went forward to that, but that's kind of capital stuff that has to be done in the plant, or if we don't keep the plant up, doesn't matter what kind of lines we put in. We don't have any water pushed through the line.
Right.
So,
Beth,
I just want to make a comment as a, forget I'm on council, that I'm one of the people paying a water bill. Because I'll admit, I don't know jack about water lines, sewer, or any of that. But I go to the grocery store. And shampoo used to be like $3.29, and now it's like $9. Potato chips are double, and pop is ridiculous. And then you see an ad on the TV for a new F-150. But I don't want to have to go out and buy one. I don't think it's gonna surprise people, especially when you tell them that you haven't done anything for 13 years. That may have been a fault, but I'm not gonna be critical of that. But I mean, I'm just saying that I'm not gonna, at least me, is not gonna be that surprised by that, especially when really on the low, what you said was 16,000, an awful lot of your people, is like $4 a month. Now, if you were gonna, well, you are taking it at 50%, but still, if it was gonna raise your bill from, like, I don't know, I think my bill's like $90 every 2 months or something along those lines. You know, if you were gonna take that up to $180, I mean, I don't know. I think there's some, people are gonna recognize that some of this is necessary.
Randy,
this is something that's always been important to me, that people need to know it's probably the cheapest utility that they pay on a monthly or bi-monthly basis, is water and sewer. For what they get, they probably pay a lot more for their computer or for their TVs or for other things. This is still a bargain. Getting your water and sewer for the price. I mean, they've shown some of the other communities, and stuff. Finley is still very low compared to other communities. And I just think that people need to realize that they're still getting a very cheap service for what this cost is. And the 12 years or 13 years probably should have never happened, but it happened. It's one of those things. You know, I don't know too many other things that have not increased in the last 12 years.
As a service provider, we can only absorb so much cost, and I think we've hit that.
yeah, and I appreciate personally, I appreciate the efforts of that the department has gone through to stretch this for as long as you have. But, you know, I think you made a good point that I got to live, and Dan got to live this summer down on South Main when we were digging up near 6th and or McPherson in Maine for a while, and twice, wasn't it?
Yeah.
One of the storms. Yeah, there was the new South Finley swimming pool there for a while. And you're right, the reliability of the system is paramount. Quite frankly, I kid and say people want to be able to flush and want to be able to turn on a faucet and have clean water, and those are the primary things. So and the graph though, just on the just general expense to revenue, tells a pretty tough story. You can't, something's got to change. If
Yeah.
you wanted to make some comments.
Yeah, I was just gonna add a couple of comments, you know, this, you know, again, we don't wanna have to do this, but it's the position we're in. And so we need to move forward with it. I would note, you know, Auditor Stashak, obviously, you know, folks are gonna be upset. I think, you know, some of the comments you made could have been addressed if you had chose to meet with us and go over this in
Excuse me, you
advance.
scheduled a meeting when you knew I was out of town, so thank you.
But we offered to meet with you multiple times. It's been a standing invite for over a month.
And that's not
but-
fair.
but all I-
That's gonna stop.
But I think, my point was going to be, you bring up some good points, and we're happy to try to communicate to the public and continue to reiterate how the City of Finley Department operates so effectively and how we can show them that we are doing it right. Because we are having a public meeting, and I know a lot of people are going to pay attention to this, I also just want to go on the record stating the City of Finley is not at all discussing selling our water treatment plant. That has never been a discussion point under my administration. That is not something that we're looking to do. This is a huge asset, and we're going to continue to see it as one and continue to protect it for the residents of the city of Inman. And so I just think that that's important to also note here, but we appreciate you guys' time and consideration and helping communicate this.
Well, I think
Thoughts from the committee? Yeah. Are you, is the committee supportive of, should be making a recommendation of support to the full council? Does the committee desire to get more information before we go forward with this? Let's
What more information?
the public's got.
I have a question. Because you brought it up, there's a lot of people watching this. I think they need to understand, for them, this is a sudden discussion. And 50% increase is big when to the public. Whether you are a person who's on Medicaid, you're a middle income family, or you're a wealthier family. It's a big discussion. And, you know, we can talk about, you know, cars getting more expensive and shampoo, great, but we have to justify our rate increase to our operations. And what you're showing, I guess my question is, how did you come up with 50%? I mean, to me, that the original discussions that were being.
So that was a question. What went into this dollar amount, and what other options?
Could we
were
have done it
examined?
lesser? Can we start smaller? Was it necessary?
So we did run multiple scenarios, and again, that's why I don't want to focus, you keep dwelling on the 50%.
I'm not dwelling, the public is, trust me, the public's dwelling on it.
Again, I'm gonna,
Rob, so run us through what you looked at with other rate options and other models.
so we started significantly lower. We looked at 10%. We ran every model in every different scenario. We looked at a 30% and then a year-over-year increase, and we were running so many different scenarios, like maybe it's a less drastic initial in 24, but then we still had to make sure that the revenues were in line with the expenses as they're going to grow, because they are not going to become less. So as that trajectory grows, we continued to work that model, and it was like, okay, to use the 50%, that's drastic, that's scary, that's not what we want the message to be, but unfortunately, that's going to be. What if it's 25%? Okay, well, 25% is not going to we're still going to be in the red next year. So then, all right, in 25, we're going to have to do another 15 or 20%. So
Where are you trying to be? Like, are we trying to be reversing it, level with it? What do other
our goal,
communities in Ohio look like when you are charting it?
our goal
What's
is
the
to
difference?
maintain that we are able to pay our bills, no matter if it's a capital project or our operating expenses. We want to be able to pay the labor expenses and the chemical expenses and everything else, and that's where we are.
Let's go to the next slide.
So,
So,
Is
oh,
it
I
mine?
don't think,
Is
yeah,
it
you gotta
mine?
do it. Sorry, I tried to do it. I guess one thing I would just break, if we want to go to the most basic version, is
What do we?
I'm gonna use ballpark numbers that our annual revenue is just under 9 million. I'm making sure that I'm just under 9. Our annual operations revenue, just people, basic chemicals, operations, no capital improvements, is over $9 million.
I haven't seen that number, where's that coming from? Because I've seen it with capital, I haven't seen it without the capital.
coming from your
From the
numbers,
budget?
from the,
But
Budget
I mean,
It's
that's
coming-
what you need to present, and that goes to my comments earlier. Present it that way. This is our operations, no
But you
capital.
can't just run a plant with no capital
I
investment.
get that, but I'm trying to help you here. I'm saying from my
these are
perspective,
your numbers, Jim.
no, and I'm
So your
saying,
transparency page, these are your numbers.
okay, what I'm saying is, you're trying to make a case, and everybody's asking you to justify it, and I'm saying if you're going to justify it, you're gonna have to do that. You're gonna have to show people, this is what our operations cost. And if they're driving around in new Ford F-250s, people are gonna look at it different than if they're driving around in Ford F-150s, to best comment. But show that those are done, because people know we're debt free. People know we've done things. People know that there's, and I'm arguing exactly what you said. I think I'm arguing for a promise. I think if you're gonna do this, you need to make a promise to the community as to what that water system's gonna look like and what those investments are gonna be and what your criterion are for those investments. So we don't go running off buying equipment that could be perceived as exorbitant for our needs, or that we're not oversizing. And I think if you embed that in, you'll go a long way to making your case if the numbers justify the case.
Well, in our discussions previously, we talked about this master plan, whatever you want to call it, that sets out the capital, kind of answers that question, sets out the capital look at this of the water utility for the next 5, 10 plus years. And that deals with, thankfully that we have good capacity at the reservoir, but that includes that what has to happen in that plant, if it needs to happen at that plant, or if it's new plant consideration time. And my expectation in our conversations is that planning process starts immediately. But also that there are a handful of things that you know you have to do, and any plan is going to tell you that, and not to wait for a 1 or 2 year planning process in order to do the things that you know you must do. Because if we don't have a functioning water system, pretty much nothing else is going to matter in this town.
Yeah,
And I think you guys are aware of that, but my statement here is that, yeah, I want the plan, but also to continue to do the efforts. To me, these charts, and especially when you say that your operating expenses and operating revenues are give or take 10% within each other, if you can't do CapEx on top of that, you're in deep trouble. And which is then me saying, I don't like the rate increases. I'd rather we don't, but the reality is you need to. And so I'll give you the vote of approval to continue on.
Okay.
And to Randy and Josh, if you want that in the form of a motion, because I think our options here to give them input is to say, yes, proceed with as suggested. We'll make the recommendation to council, even though council doesn't have specifically, even though this is Rob's decision, he wants council support. And that we provide that support either in a committee report of some manner. So that's one way to go through. The second way to go through is we do not support this process, this rate increase at this time. Ask for additional information to justify. I mean, if there's a third option, please suggest it, and we can discuss it. Other than that, I think those are our two options at this point.
Rob, one last
And
question.
Holly, this is now, Holly, excuse me, this is now a committee conversation time. So I have a question on the table to the committee members.
It's obvious our expenses are gonna continue to go up. Without a rate change and with pretty much flat usage projections, we're gonna be underwater. To me, we don't have much of a choice but to do a rate increase and to make sure that we're on solid financial ground. We have to have a water system that works for everybody here, because if we don't, is that a problem we really want to deal with? I sure don't want to deal with that problem. This is going to be tough enough to deal with a rate increase. But if you have a water system that fails,
Well, there's no imminent threat of failure to our water system.
but no, not
And
imminent.
there hasn't been. that
No,
I'm aware of.
not a short term, but as things get older, we don't have the money to put into the capital improvements.
Well, we can't paint the picture that we're limiting along to the public, though, because we're not limiting along. we've got good
And
people. good
and that
equipment,
that is a good point.
Yeah, it's a good point, but
That's a good point.
we can't have ourselves on a downward trajectory with these,
Which we don't.
no, that's what we're trying to prevent.
No. And they did not take grants into consideration on this too, which is one of the reasons you might be wise as a council to take a step back and look at the budget, because it would be unfair to say we're not gonna get any money in grants. And OPCW,
We'll get something.
we're gonna, we've
Fair
got
enough.
millions.
Which
This
is the
community's got
reason-
more than ever.
Which is the reason that we focused on making an adjustment for really the next 5 years, where you see that then minimum reserve, the beginning balance starts to decline again. That gives us the buffer to be able to hopefully make adjustments that bring in some of these different things. It just kind of brings us to that level where we can then live within it again, have those other conversations. And then if we need to make other adjustments, great. If we win the lottery and somebody buys a new water plant, then we can raise lower rates. That would be great.
You
So
talked
Randy,
about-
I've heard from Josh and I've stated, I'm interested
I
in
think
your view of
what
where
I
we're
said
at.
before, I still think that we need to continually maintain that we have enough money to do some capital projects in the plan.
But what's the
Okay,
right
we're not-
percent?
So,
We're not desperate for it.
No, we're not desperate.
Well, when
Well,
they
if
said
you
3 to
still-
4% on average, and we've been mayor for 4 years almost, this sudden change, well, 3 to 4% a year is not 50% increase.
3 to 4%. Are you talking about the other communities?
Yeah,
doing
you were
regular
comparing, we're all about comparing it against other places in
Yeah,
Ohio.
so as we looked at the beginning of the presentation, on average, other Ohio municipalities do an annual increase of 4%. If you look compounding that and ran it out, what their what their rates are today, this proposed rate is still 10%
But
below
we're
that.
different than them, we're not them. But even that percentage increase
okay,
is
so.
not
from a-
50%. Well, I
Holly,
think we
Holly,
need to understand this and the
Holly,
public does.
the three
And more
committee members
information is needed.
are looking to make our recommendation. And from what I'm hearing from Josh and Randy and myself is that we're of the same opinion that it's unfortunate, nobody likes raising rates,
I don't
but
want
but
to
it's
raise
a
more either.
necessity.
And
And I think there is something to be said that
Position rather than a pause and.
analysis of this from an from a pure splitting the CapEx, looking at this with or presenting this with from an operations, just a pure operations standpoint with CapEx excluded, and then including full, because as Randy totally agree, you need both. And so this is an interesting committee report because we were recommending, you don't need a recommendation, but my understanding is you were asking for council support in this.
I am.
Okay. And so then we're making a recommendation to the full council as to this.
Does council really want to own that?
Yeah, it's not our job to own it. So
You
if you want
will
to make
own
a
it if you do
recommendation,
this.
that's taking the heat off your administration and sharing it with them.
And you
when
don't
we
have
no say.
And you don't have the capital plan, you don't have the master plan.
If you
You
guys
don't have
haven't
the
looked at the
Arcadis
10-year
plan?
capital plan, that's on you guys because we.
But you
presented-
haven't
Hey,
raised rates
time
in
out,
4
time out,
years.
time out.
This is sudden.
Holly,
Grant,
enough. I will make a motion that we recommend council support for the water rate increase as presented. And ask for additional analysis of the rate plan with better visibility into operating expenses separate from capital expenses.
I'll second.
Now I just have to be able to repeat what I said.
I appreciate the opportunity to share my comments. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Yeah, that's it. Grant, if I could comment while you're writing there. I would appreciate it if you did.
I can.
So the recommendation is it came out the second time, we recommend council support for the rate increase as proposed and further visibility into expenses delineating CapEx from operating expenses. Okay. All those in favor of that recommendation, please say aye.
Aye.
Say aye. With that, we have
Thank you, guys. I know that this is a difficult topic, but obviously we all have a responsibility to manage this city of Findlay wisely. This is a huge resource and asset that we have to appropriately maintain. And I wish that it didn't cost as much money as it does, but we have a responsibility to make
Yep.
sure that we're investing in it appropriately. So I appreciate your support, even recognizing that it is not required.
as part of the minutes, I asked that you provide Denise with a copy of this document with the proposed rules, changes, and with the PowerPoint that you presented here, so that they can be made part of the minutes for the meeting.
Yes, so we do intend on sending a press release out and goes over what was presented here tonight, as well as putting the presentation on the website.
Okay, and then so then this committee report will be on council's agenda for the next meeting, and council can have further discussion. And then we will look at scheduling a meeting prior to our next full council meeting to go over
Yeah.
rules. Yes.
Correct.
Sounds good. And with that, I will call this meeting to a close. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
one and all.